Okay, not sure what the chirping was from.
I don't know.
Oh, so hi everybody, this is Jennifer Kronk, and I have John Stevens with us. It's Stevens, right? Not Steven.
Yeah, Stevens.
Who is a Q rock star, one of the moderators of CA Ed Chat, and you are doing, what is the name of the conference you're going to be doing pretty soon?
I don't know which one you're talking about.
It's one of the California conferences. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
And I'm sorry you and Steven were by yourselves. I had no Wi-Fi.
No problem. I got to meet him. I was like, oh, where are you?
So, John, you're on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm out in Southern California.
And Sandra, where are you?
I'm in Toronto.
Oh, that's right, in Toronto. Sandra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Sandra Chow. I'm at Toronto. I'm an elementary school teacher on maternity leave.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So, so you're presenting soon, John. Isn't there a conference in California you're presenting at pretty soon?
Yeah, I think the one that you're talking about just happened a couple weekends ago. It was CMC. It was a California Math Council conference.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. Sorry, I thought that it was still coming.
No, that one has passed.
So thank you guys so much. I'm so behind the game, I don't even have my lower third up. So if you wouldn't mind, while I put up my lower third, if you both wouldn't mind talking about what you do and how you got involved in using math in Google Apps for Education. And that's why I reached out to both of you, is because you're both so proficient at it. And it's definitely something that, for my role as a professional developer, I service 5 districts, and that's one of the shortfalls that I have, is that I have a literacy background, not a math background. And so when I'm working with my math teachers, I can show them some of the ideas that I have. But I don't have the street cred that you have when it comes to how does it really work when you're doing instruction with Google Apps. So if you would tell me a little bit about your experience and how you started using math in Google Apps, I would really appreciate it.
I can start.
Yeah.
So I started when we were in a grade 5-6 class, and we were trying to find a way where we could have all the students collaborate on a kind of whiteboard canvas together so that we could do math band show with them virtually. I'm not sure if people are familiar with math band show, but it's a Japanese method of teaching mathematics where students do problem solving and then share their problem solving solution on a board, and then we manipulate their problem solving and their strategies so that everybody can see the various strategies to solve the problem. So we were trying to find a way that we could do this virtually, and we came about using Google Slides, because it was a really great way where each student can individually have a workspace and pretty much an infinite canvas, because you can use the gray spaces around as well as the speaker notes, and then also have all the tools such as the drawing tools to be able to share their thinking with like lines or tables in various formats. So being able to share their math thinking was very important for us, and then having that collaborative piece and being able to have every student on one document and being able to look at each other's work was a really, really great feature to have on Google Slides. And so that's basically how we kind of launched into using Google Apps for Education with math. And then after that, just all the pieces kind of fell in, where you can link to Google, you can include drawings, you can include commenting features, which made it really great for formative assessment and for feedback. Then tools like Kaizena came about so we could give audio feedback, and then our IEP students were able to use features like text-to-speech or speech-to-text, so that the language component was not a hindrance for their math. So that's basically kind of our journey into it.
Jennifer, we can't.
Yeah, it's my spice. So what was the Japanese technique that you were speaking of?
It's called Math Bansho, B-A-N-S-H-O.
Thank you. And that's what I saw you present on ISTE that I was so taken with. I thought that was really, really a fabulous use of using slides that I personally had never thought of. And John, why don't you tell us how you use Google Apps for Ed when it comes to using math? And I understand you have a math background.
Yeah, so I'm one of those nerds that has a degree in it. And so for me, it kind of stemmed out of necessity. I was an 8th grade math teacher for 7 years and then a geometry teacher for a semester before taking on a technology coaching position. And in my last couple years at the 8th grade level and then full force at the high school level, I was flipping my classroom and I wanted ways to collect data about what my students were seeing outside of the classroom, getting a chance to drive instruction the next day. So I started creating forms that would basically just get the temperature. You know, did you understand what it was that we were doing? And allowed me to do more with that data when they walked through the door, before they walked through the door. Gave me a better chance to see where they were at. As I got more and more involved, as many of us or all of us do with Google, we start to find different ways to use it. So for my sophomores, my geometry class, a lot of what they did was in Google. So they created their own portfolios, they shared those folders with me, and then that was the way that they turned everything in. So they had their own folder for the class. They dumped in all of the images of their work because I'm not for a paperless classroom in math. I want kids to be able to draw. I want their hands to get pencil markings all over them, and I want them to feel an eraser, you know, being able to go through the grind of solving a complex math problem. So what they did was they would take pictures of their work and they would upload it to their folder for me. And from there, I could take home a stack of 175 digital copies of work rather than a stack of 175 actual pieces of paper. And as Sandra's certainly going through, you know, taking them home with 2 kids at home can end up being a nightmare. So it was nice to be able to have everything there. From that point, I started turning all of my assessments into Google Forms and started dropping in images. So kids were telling me missing angles and lengths of sides of parallelograms. A lot of stuff was being collected. And then one of the final things that we did was a school boundaries project, and I can show you that here. So this is like my last hurrah in the classroom, which was really cool. So the kids took the school district. So this is the overall school district. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom, this is what our boundaries look like. And my question to the students was simply, are the boundaries fair? And what it really was practicing area and perimeter of irregular polygons. And what the students did was they filled out a form, and Doctopus sent out a digital copy of this template, and the students worked within here to be able to drop in all of their data. So they were able to be full-on researchers, and they still turned in a sheet of paper that had the work that they had done during the project, but all of their data went into here, all of their defense of their stance came into it. So it was really powerful stuff, a lot of fun. And at that point, we didn't have Chromebooks, we didn't have laptops. Kids were doing all of that on their cell phone. So, you know, now our district has Chromebooks available to the students, but my students were doing it from the luxury of their iPhone 4s, or, you know, the smaller versions of phones than especially what they have now.
That's really great stuff from both of you, and I'm so happy that I have an elementary and I have secondary, because it's I feel like at least that's I'm getting my wheels are already turning on some of the things that we can do. Sandra, what did your kids use as far as the technology? Did they use Chromebooks? Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
We had netbooks.
Okay.
They were small HP laptops, which was great because sometimes we use Smart Notebook as well.
Okay.
But basically, it was a one-to-one situation.
And so you moved, Sandra, you were primarily working with slides and using slides as that overall document. Did you ever find when you're doing something like that using slides? So I saw your presentation at ISTE, and I saw that the problems were on the slides, and then the kids were going on their individual slides to work on them, and they could peek at everybody's work. Did you find that some kids were riding on the coattails of others more doing it like that?
No, and actually we kind of encouraged it, especially in the problem-solving time period. They weren't summative assessments. They were problem-solving. So they were in the classroom. I could observe them. It was still noisy in the classroom. It was just that the tool that they were using to actually solve the problem was the technology. And if they were using manipulatives, they could access the online manipulatives. They could still use the hands-on manipulatives, and exactly like what Stephen was saying, like they could take a picture and just insert it using their laptop. So that was really handy. And I mean, they were small computers, so they just basically lifted up their computer and took a picture of their desk. So sometimes they did that as well. But the idea was the students would, if they needed help, it was okay. We encouraged that. We wanted the natural mentoring to happen between the students so that it was not always the teacher that they went to. If they needed to just take a peek and see what other people were doing, that was perfectly fine for us.
That sounds really, really great. And I love the commenting. And when I saw you do it and seeing that kids were using everything, the entire workspace, I thought that was really great. John, one of the questions that I have for you is that when you were saying that your kids were submitting a portfolio of their work, and when I was still in the classroom, all my kids had were the cell phones too. But it was, you know, as an English teacher, as a background. So how did you give feedback in that portfolio work? I mean, what I'm envisioning in my mind is if a math student takes a picture of their work that they've done orthographically, then the kid could import it into drawing, and then you can insert comments that way. How did you give them feedback on them?
Good question. Let me go into it first. All right. So this is here. So this is one of my students' folders, and so what I can do is I can take a look, and I was, for example, I was looking at question number 2, question 3, and question 4. What I can do is I can have the details open, and down here in the description, I can give that student feedback specifically. And then it was just a matter of training my students to be able to look for the eye in their phone, Google Drive app, and then be able to find that description to be able to see the feedback that I was trying to give to them.
Okay. That's great. And so you actually just kept all their work in one folder then?
Yep, and I didn't keep anything. It was they created the folder and they shared it with me, and all I did was drag it into period 1, period 2, whatever. And anytime they needed to turn something in, they dropped it into that folder, and it was nice because I was willing to embrace those speed bumps along the way of I turned it in. No, you didn't. You didn't put it into the folder for this class. Yes, it's in your drive. No, it's not turned in. And I'm okay with that kind of stuff. You know, it helps to be able to have somebody there showing them like, no, you didn't do it correctly. This is what we were looking for, and let's fix it. You know, no punishment or anything.
Yeah, I remember going through the whole protocol with every single one of my classes, everybody at the same time, creating a hand-in folder, naming it their name, telling what grade it is. Everybody share it to me. I'm collecting it all. Back in the days before we had classroom.
Yeah.
back in the days when I was still in the classroom, we didn't have classroom. Sandra, what about you? How did you give feedback to your kids on their work? Did you actually go into the slide itself?
Yeah, so I'm pulling up some work now because Stephen is modeling it so well. So.
But I'm so sorry to just like jump you guys and just like, come on, Math Hangout, let's do this.
I know, I wasn't actually sure what the setting was.
I totally ambushed you, and I apologize, and I appreciate you being so open.
Lucky I have my math and GAFE presentation handy. So here's just an example. So you can see there's the teacher modeling and the student following, but what we found most successful was the student modeling. So you can see the students would model various ways that they would let's just make this a little bit bigger, that they would solve the problem. So you have some students using number lines. Just 1 second while it's loading. My Chromebook's a bit slow. So there's number lines here that the students are using, and then tables and pictures. And you can see on the side, I don't know if you can see it, but it'll say, we'll use the commenting feature to kind of give feedback. So on the right, we'll kind of focus in on the specific area that the students did well on. So for example, here, where they were making a table, my colleague wrote, "Do you mean pack 1 of box 1?" And then Angel wrote back, "Pack of freezies," and then we kind of continue on that feedback. Sometimes, again, for the band show format, the consolidation piece was very important. So after the students had their chance to problem solve, we would oftentimes come back to the carpet and then talk about the ways that each of the students problem solved. So then we often would just create a text box right on the side in the gray space. And you can see here on the top it says highlight keywords, done, chunk up the question. So we kind of wrote down the things that they did, and we'd highlight them on the side for other students to see. And we would have the discussion around that. So we would often do the virtual feedback as well as just face-to-face feedback.
I really like that a lot, especially because I have an elementary school age boy, and when he has to do any kind of physical modeling or picture drawing, it's usually just like hash marks. He absolutely refuses to use objects or draw objects. He just wants to get it done. So I actually think that this is something like just inserting objects as part of counters that's really, really interesting. So you would also bring them back, give them more feedback, and bring them back to the rug, talk about the experience, and did you find the kids would oftentimes really divert from how they're solving it? Like one student would solve it one way and another student would completely go in a different direction?
Well, that was one thing that we built upon was the various methods to solve problems. And so that was something that in the classroom we would kind of talk about. So in Canada, or in particular in Ontario, we actually have something called learning goals and success criteria. And so, for example, the students would have a learning goal. So for that day, we would be working on fractions or whatever it might be. But then in order to be successful at their problem solving, there was certain skills that they needed to have in order to be successful at the activity. And so we would often have these success criteria over here, and you can see here we have the various success criteria for problem solving. And so throughout the year, we're kind of building upon these various strategies that they can use. And so the kids start to experiment with the various strategies like illustrations, T-tables, number lines, place value charts, base 10 blocks, diagrams, so hundreds charts. And then as they see other students, you know, for example, in this one, they're drawing a picture, they'll remember that and they'll try to do it in a different way. And you can see over here, there's a table version and then the number line. So once the kids see it once, they start using that. And then oftentimes I would myself share that I have strategies that I really, really, really like, and it's okay to have a favorite, and so we would talk to the students about that.
That's great. I like that. That's really interesting. What do you think, John?
That's impressive.
I think it's so awesome that you're both on the same Hangout, so you both can also see not just selfishly for me, but I can also, you guys can also see how you're both doing it as well.
Yeah.
John, let me ask you about tests, and Sandra, this goes for you as well. Now, John, you mentioned that you were using forms for your tests.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you use tests, or how did you use forms? Did you have your kids fill in a blank text area? Did you give your kids multiple choice? Did it depend on the test? What was the most effective for you?
Funny you should say that.
Let me guess. You have one.
Got one right here. See, I came loaded.
Best.
I know, you're making me look bad. I have to like pull up all of my things.
Well, Sandra,
I have my kids on my side.
In your defense, I've had like 3 weeks to prepare for this, so.
Yeah, Sandra, you've had like an hour. And you have a newborn.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. So, okay, so I had the kids, and the one thing that I would change is I would change it from name to first name and then last name. But this is an assessment that I had my students take. The email is because I've also got it attached to Flubrew, which I'll show you here in a minute. But so this is an image that I dropped in, so created it in Google Draw, and then dropped it into here. And basically this is the same assessment that kids would have taken on paper, but I got a chance to grade 175 of them in about 4 minutes.
Nice.
So find the measure of the angle, what's true about a parallelogram, so the kids got a chance to click multiple properties or statements.
Mm-hmm.
And then measure of side lengths, what are the coordinates. I had to make sure that I was asking the right question,
mm-hmm.
which was nice because it forced me to think, okay, how can I ask this question in a better way to get the best information from my students? So once again, another parallelogram and a bunch of different questions. Some of the stuff gets a little bit clunky, and I know that there is an add-on called GMath.
Yes.
That you can drop in there. It still isn't perfect, but they've got, as of I think last week, they just added in multiple choice responses that you can use with GMath. And what that means for me, the math teacher, is now I can ask a question, like a question here saying, what is the correct equation for the quadratic or for the binomial multiplication that you're about to do? I can do some higher level mathematics.
Okay.
And have them be multiple choice, whereas in the past it was, and if you're going to use regular forms, it was always multiple choice is text exclusive, which makes it very difficult. You can't do any equations, you can't do any graphs, you can't do anything that is more dynamic than asking for numbers and letters. So the kids take the assessment, and I blacked out their names and all that kind of stuff. Let me go into there. And so these are the questions. The highlighting is all me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, and once again, Flubrew has continued to get better. So let's assume that this was my answer key. If I wanted the answer key to accommodate more than just 5,2, I can go 5,2, which is what a lot of my kids did.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really the only thing that I had to clean up, was just the aesthetics of everything and making sure that everything was the way that it was supposed to be and graded accordingly. For example, I think that was it. So, 9/2, 3. They would need parentheses around that. It would still be wrong, but they would need parentheses around that. So then using Flubrew, I was able to grade it. And this isn't an accurate grade because there were some free response questions that I chose to grade myself.
Yeah, I was wondering about the free response that I saw in there. I was like, wait a minute, what did Flubrew just do?
Right. Yeah, it graded the majority of them, but then I went back in. Oh, pivot table is irrelevant. I went back in and I added Flubrew's grades to the ones that I graded by hand, and these are the student grades here.
Okay.
So Flubru didn't do all of the grading for me, but it sure saved me a lot of time when I've got 175 students over 5 periods. Uh, you know, my colleagues were spending 4 and 5 hours grading. I spent 45 minutes from start to finish.
So what would be your suggestions to a high school math teacher? And I'm actually meeting with a math team tomorrow, I'm so excited that we were able to have this hangout today before I meet with them, because I will be showing them this video. So it's going to go right to some secondary math teachers tomorrow. If they're considering using Google Forms and Flubaroo, what would be some suggestions that you would make to them?
The first suggestion I would make is don't make the first one mean anything. I've got a teacher right now who emailed me this morning and was asking about, I want to make a test for Friday, and he wants it to be, a summative assessment. I'm like, try doing like a warm-up first. Try doing a little sample quiz on Wednesday. Something that the kids aren't going to feel like you're throwing a curveball at them when you're trying to assess them on understanding. So to that group of high school teachers, I would start off, build a 2-question assessment to start the day, or their homework is to fill out this form and it's to answer 2 questions. It also gets you, the teacher, a little bit more acquainted and familiar with setting up forms, knowing what happens to the data, and then using Flubaroo to assess that data. Outside of that, once you get comfortable with it, Flubaroo really does a good job of walking you through the steps from start to finish. Once it's installed onto a spreadsheet, it's pretty good about, next do this, and then we do this, and it gives you some helpful tips or hints that you can do to accept multiple responses, like the percent or. You can grade where capitalization matters, and I mean there's a few other things that you can do with it, but for me, I was more focused on, did my kids know that it was 5,2?
Okay, that's great. Sandra, from your perspective, have you used Flubaroo and Forms also in the class with your kids?
I very rarely used it. If at all, I sometimes used quizzes on Google Forms, and then just use the conditional formatting feature to quickly just assess how the students are doing on a certain content area before moving on with the lesson. Usually when I did assessments, because I taught a grade 5-6 class, we would often have, and I can't pull it up right now, sorry, but
you learn a lot in just 1 hour's notice.
we would often just have a couple of questions, and again, we have our assessments broken down into 4 areas. So knowledge, and then application, communication, and then application. Did I say application? Thinking. Thinking was the last one. And so each of the questions that we had would be in those 4 different areas. So oftentimes the knowledge one would be just simple questions like, how would you convert this from an improper fraction to a mixed fraction? And then the thinking would be something that would be require a little bit more challenge. They might have to actually maybe use equivalent fractions or something to change it. And then communication would often be one where the students actually had to explain their thinking. So why is, like you say you had a decimal like 0.4, why is 0.4 the same as 0.40? And then the students have to explain that. And so that would be a communication type question. And then an application would often be a problem, which would be very similar to the problems that I had just modeled for you. And those the students would do on a weekly basis in just a journal format. And so that's often how I would assess them in a more grander scale. But because I got to see their problem solving on pretty much a week-to-week basis, that was also something that I used a lot.
Now, do you also agree with John as well that I mean, I personally, as somebody who writes a lot, I like the orthographic process. I mean, I'm very much steeped in Google Apps, and just about everything I create is in Google Apps, but there are some things that I must do orthographically with pen and paper or pencil and paper. And do you feel the same way when it comes to math specifically? Or are you pretty much very comfortable in the digital format as well as on paper?
I think when it comes to assessments, part of the reason is because um, it actually sometimes takes a little bit more time for the kids to use the Google Slides because they're actually like creating drawings and things like that on the Google slide. It's not like they have tablets. I mean, if they had a tablet of some sort, I think it would be different because then they can actually use the scribble feature and draw on the Google slide. I think that would be a lot easier. Or just even draw on one of those whiteboard apps and then take a picture and then attach it onto the Google slide. They could do that as well. But because we don't have iPads, so they're basically using a mouse, it oftentimes takes longer for them to be able to just even write a fraction.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's workarounds, but the workaround takes more time than just writing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times just having the kids write on pencil and paper is way more efficient, and the kids prefer it. I have a few students who are on IEPs who, during an assessment, they actually do their assessment on the computer, and that is mainly because of the language component, and the student actually chooses. I give him a choice, and he chooses to do it oftentimes, or the students often choose to do their assessment on the computer, and that's part of their IEP.
Okay, thank you. John, would you say that most of your assessments, I just want to get more of a clear picture, when you were still in the classroom, were the majority of your assessments in forms?
Forms of some sort, yeah. It was either that or Socrative.
Okay. And Socrative is another great app that allows you to use devices with your kids.
Yeah, I mean, except for the times when I needed something graphed, and then be on paper pencil.
Now I have specific questions asked by teachers for you. So for you both. And this is coming from one of my secondary teachers. How, and Sandra, even though it's secondary, please feel free to answer as well. How is Google Apps useful in a secondary classroom, secondary math classroom? We have calculator technology and we don't do essays. And even though your experience is not necessarily secondary, Sandra, I'm very open to your feedback on that as well. So, John, how is Google Apps useful in a secondary classroom, math classroom? We have calculator technology and we don't do essays.
Well, all the examples that I just gave you would be pretty big. As far as the calculator technology, I'm hoping that teacher is referring to a program called Desmos. That one's over here. So you know, being able to, if I wanted students to be able to graph, give me a parabola that goes up then down, then show me one that doesn't go up or down. They can do this one here. It's 5. They can do this one here. Oh. And then they can do y equals square root of x. So being able to demonstrate this, and then sure, take a screenshot of it, drop it onto a document, and put that into your portfolio. I think that is a lot more powerful than what I can do with, let's say, if the calculator technology that this teacher is referring to is a TI-83, I can do all kinds of stuff in Desmos, and that's a whole nother hour-and-a-half to 3-hour conversation in itself. But there's a lot of powerful stuff in there.
So where do you now? Is Desmos an add-on? An app?
It is, so I have it as an add-on, but I tried to find it the other day and I couldn't. So all it is on mine is a shortcut to the Desmos graphing calculator, and it's a web app.
Is it cost?
Nope, free.
I know a lot of people that are going to be very excited about that.
Yeah, and so when they get excited about that, so since you got me on this, then go to desmos.com/math, and for our pre-calc or calc teachers, you've got Simpson's rule, which talks about area under a curve. And these are all pre-done, free things. Check this one out, solids revolutions. This is another calculus example. That's really impressive. Being able to go here to desmos.com/art. And there are a lot of teachers who are finding their students' work that incorporates some of the things that we've been talking about. Like if I'm talking with my students about the equation of a circle, create something that uses a circle. And sure, you got slow mode. But if I go to something basic, like, oh, a minion, that's cute, I can go here and I'm guessing there's going to be at least 40 different equations.
That's really great.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this is that the kids start to, I'm sure that this student, whoever he or she is, Kevin, so I'm assuming it's a he probably started out with something basic and was like, ooh, I really want the eyes to look more like eyes. And so he added another circle in here. And he really wanted the hair, but he really wanted more hair. And the hair wasn't quite the way he wanted it to. So he changed the hair. It makes it so that you can give the kids a prompt and then let them get lost in it. And sooner than later, they're 40 equations deep. And, while these equations look like they're pretty gnarly, they're fairly basic problems. I mean, this is a linear equation, and you're talking about restricting the domain. So you talk to the kids about restricting a domain. It's called a piecewise function. We can do this in 6th grade, 7th grade. You don't really need to know a whole lot about advanced mathematics in order to do stuff like this. So tons of fun stuff on those two. And then the mother load is when you go to teacher.desmos.com.
And this is still all free?
Still all free.
So you just totally blew up my next question, which is, what are your favorite apps?
Yeah, this one.
Great. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming, and overwhelming in a good way. There are a lot of different activities. You can actually create your own activity and your own polygraph. Polygraph is kind of like Guess Who.
Okay.
So for Sandra, taking a look at this one here, I've got a kindergartner, and so I built this for me and my kindergartner to play. And so he picks a number, and so as the teacher, I can set this up. As a student, I would go to student.desmos.com.
So I'm just going to clarify that we are out of the Google Apps suite, but what you have done is they've done work in Desmos, taken a screenshot, and then put that in their portfolio.
Yep.
Great.
So real quick, just to show you this, take any of, I guess you can't see it. Let me do Control. Second.
So you actually are doing this with a partner?
Yeah. So it's partnered up, and teachers all around our district are doing this. So one kid will select one that's special to them, and then the other kid, and I've done this with my 5-year-old, the other kid asks questions, like, is your number prime? My kindergartner's not going to ask that, but is your number bigger than 5? And I would be able to say yes. And then he would be able to deselect all of these. The goal is for both of us to be able to reach to the conclusion that the number that I chose was 7.
Oh, that's really cute.
So going back, that's your kinder example, but for secondary level, oh, that's an activity. Being able to do this one here. You've got a bunch of cubic functions that students need to know the properties of. Well, is your is your cubic function a positive or a negative leading coefficient? So it gets the kids to ask better questions. So lots of fun stuff. I will remove myself from the tangent that I was traveling on. But yeah, tons of fun stuff there.
And then on my end, even the strategy that I use for Google Slides, that is totally applicable for high school. So being able to change the background to graphing paper so that students can actually then create their, it could be any, the same kind of algebraic features. So they can actually still type in their algebraic functions and then create their graphs on the graphing paper as a background. We've done tons of transformational geometry on that as well, where the students have to show their lines of symmetry and all of that. So in high school, it's just another level, so they can do their trigonometry on that and calculate the angles and what the length of the line would be. There's also There's also really, really great websites such as Google Public Data Explorer. So being able to actually use authentic information for the students to do data management is a really, really great tool. So we found a lot of times where the students are more engaged, we actually are working with real data. So Google has tons of really great websites to be able to access that. So Google Data Explorer has a lot of information such as population across the world. You can access fertility rates, poverty, environmental carbon monoxide emissions, and then have the students write up explanations on, what kind of graph would be best for this kind of data. What would be, like, create scatter plots, what's the line of best fit. They can also use Google Trends, so then use information that is a little bit more pop culture and have the kids basically explore what people are searching, what are the trends in searches, and have the same kind of data management kind of capability as well. And then similar to what John was saying was about being able to access offline resources to be able to screen capture it and then put it on the Google Slides. I would do the same thing with the students as well. So you can even access websites such as GeoGebra. There's tons, there's a National Library of Virtual Manipulatives. So that has a lot of features that are applicable for high school as well. So they have algebra tiles, and the students can show their thinking using these virtual manipulatives and then screen capture it and put it over onto the Google site. And then so easily you can create algebra tiles on Google Slides. They're just squares. So you can actually have the students represent their equation using algebra tiles, but they're just using tables and squares that they've created on Google Slides. You can actually even create the template ahead of time for them and tell them to duplicate the square that you've created. So essentially you've created the manipulative for them, and then they're just representing it on the slide.
There's so much great stuff that's coming out of both of you right now. I'm so excited. All right, so, and that was, Desmos was John's favorite app, and it sounds like those are your favorite techniques. Is that right, Tina? what would be before we, oh, and Sandra, you just addressed some of this. Some of the biggest concerns I've had from some of my teachers is how to do graphs, box plots, histograms, linear regressions, and scatter plots when you're in a Google Apps environment. I mean, Desmos seemed to just like shatter some of that. And Sandra, you used up some of that as well.
Yeah, basically you just, when you know how you can change the background on a Google slide, and then you just Google some kind of graphing paper, and then that becomes the background of your Google slide. And then if you're doing scatter plot, you just need like a circle or a dot or an X, happy faces, whatever the kids want, and then all of a sudden you have a scatter plot.
I think that one of my teachers was looking for, I think Desmos was probably one of the things that she was looking for, is a piece of software that was going to take the data and generate it for them.
Yep. Desmos, you can actually, so I'm going to have to get going here really soon.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to have to get going soon, too.
So here, I'll just show you this. So I showed you a bunch of the graphing stuff that it does, but you can actually take a spreadsheet of data, like a Google Sheet, of all kinds of form responses, and you can drop them into here. I'm obviously entering them in manually, but you can drop them in here, and using there's a regression tool, mx1 plus b, or sorry, m1. So anyways, there are ways that you can drop in regressions into scatter plots, into your data, and have it be analytical almost immediately. So, the box and whisker plot, probably best off for what Sandra's talking about, using a Google slide. But for scatter plots and talking about regressions and statistical analysis, if you go onto Twitter, you can follow certain people, and if you get in touch with me, I can talk to you about who to follow on that. And there's some people doing some really incredible things with it.
Yeah, I would definitely appreciate any people that I could forward, and if you don't mind me putting both of your names and your Twitter handles out there for teachers to reach out to. Sandra, I don't want to just assume because you have a newborn that you're going to be open to being able to respond to people so readily. But
yeah, I'd be glad to, especially over Twitter, respond and then set a time with people. Over here in Canada, there's Mathlete Pierce, at Mathlete Pierce. He's amazing. And Matt Geek Orr.
Yep.
Matt Geek, I'm writing these down. Somebody put them in the chat, please.
How about I just do... So there's a list of all the people who are on Twitter who are also bloggers, and I'm dropping it into...
That's Cyberman's list?
No, this is something that we call the MITBOS or MTBOS.
Got it. Thank you.
And it's a list. It's on a spreadsheet, and then it's also a searchable... I built a custom Google search engine of just those people, so that way anytime you're looking for something for stats, you can type in regressions, and you're not going to get Purple Math and Math Open Ref and Khan Academy. You're going to get Sandra's blog post about how she taught regressions to her 11th graders, and you'll get a chance to really dive in and see what she did to help her students. So
that is awesome. Guys, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to just have a conversation with me, and just know that you really just helped a whole bunch of different teachers that I'm trying to help, but I definitely don't have the experience to do that. So I can do Google Apps all the way, but when it comes to teaching math, that's where I was falling short. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good one. Nice to meet you both.
It's a little bit noisier than anticipated.
I remember and miss those days. I really do.
All right. Take care, ladies. Nice to meet you both.
Bye. Nice meeting you.